What's a logical brother?
Sure. So, in general, right, people are saddled with genetic family. Like, you don't get to choose your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins. So a good friend of mine sort of coined the term, at least as far as I've been aware of, like having a logical family. So those around you that you choose.
And are you adopted, or did you abandon your non-logical family?
No, I just have a very small logical family. It's just my parents. Really.
No, not a logical, a small blood family.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Very small blood family.
Okay.
Right. I have some cousins. They all live in different places around the country. In general, we're like fairly separated in terms of age. And so there's just very little of that close family tie that I have.
Yeah, we don't have it in this generation almost at all anymore. You're like, you have a couple friends maybe, and you have a couple I mean, me and my brother were 4 years apart in age. He lives up in Salem. He just had a baby a week ago, speaking of your logical brother. And it's like, you know, you just don't see family very much anymore. Whereas, I mean, 100 years ago, when would you not like be living in a multi-generational, or maybe 200 years ago?
Yeah, it depends on where, right? There are still places in the world that multi-generational living is the norm and expected.
If you had a kid, would you do that?
If I had a kid, I would prefer that.
Really?
Absolutely.
Like, so you just have like maybe like a guest house or like a mother-in-law, but it'd be like your kid can live there whenever they need, or like their kids.
Yeah. And my logical family, right? Like, I would prefer to be around those closest to me as often as like me or them can stand.
Drinking wine.
Right. That's right.
That's fun. Have you ever lived on a commune, or like looked into one, or?
I've looked into it, but I haven't lived on any. I think I'm a little too picky to just pick up with a commune and see how it goes. Right?
The classic.
Yeah.
I want to live on a commune, but I want to get to pick all the people. Exactly. I think that's every single person.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's tricky.
It is tricky, actually. So my family in Eugene, they live at the East Blair Housing Co-op, and so they're sort of test driving what it's like to live in a communal situation where decisions are made by consensus. It's a very interesting dynamic that they have with folks that aren't like that close to them, right? They become closer because they've lived there for a few years. But
wow, that's true. And so is there, just before we get to the housing, because that's a fascinating thing of like, hey, like my living, I'd have to like argue, or I don't even know how they decide it. You know, does one really charismatic person just get to sway the whole thing? If you have a kid, do you get 2 votes? Do you get to vote for them? I'm curious about all that, but like, how do you get someone into your logical family? Do you like, hey, let's do this? Like, is it like a marriage ceremony of like, or you just like casually like, hey, one day, like, are we brothers?
I do think there's like a dearth of ritual, right? In our society, and specifically in like my community. It would be nice to have something like that, right? Another excuse to party with my family would be fun. But really it's just sort of over time, you grow to have an understanding that this is a relationship that I will move as close to heaven and earth as I can to make sure that we maintain, right?
That's wild.
And be close to one another.
How many people do you have? Like, I mean, you're essentially saying, hey, I have really close friends, which is a rare thing in society today. Like, Kenzie and I are really lucky that we were partners and best friends, and we have a couple friends that live really close by. But like, everyone I went to high school with, everyone I went to college with, almost everyone I know, like especially coworkers, I'm like, you just don't see them anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So you actually move heaven and earth to meet, like, be around people. How many of them can you upkeep? That seems high, you know, it seems difficult.
Yeah, well, if it was on me alone to upkeep, I think the number would be very low. However, like having that sort of collaborative association with folks makes it a little bit easier. I think right now it's probably around 12 or 13
Holy shit.
folks that I'm just extremely close with and I want to maintain. There's no cap, right? The only cap is like how many people I'm able to talk to in a given day.
Yeah. Elephant in the room. Is everyone single individually? It sounds like you have a logical brother and sister. Like if 2 people break up and the other 2 get to, like, has that ever been a confusing? I mean, are they all mutually family, or you have 12 family members, but they're not all each other's?
Good question. A fair number of them are close with each other as well. However, I'd say it sort of spiderwebs. It turns into quite a net really quickly. So that degrees of separation depends, right, based on who you're talking to. So I think, right, like the ability for all of us to be close to one another is very limited. So there's a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of maintaining closeness that way.
It was necessary. I mean, I haven't seen my brother since he had his baby. He's my blood brother, and he lives in Salem. You flew here from Denver.
Yeah, that's right.
That's wild. Man, I think a lot of people are probably envious right now. I think, and I'm like, I'm very happy. I obviously like am fulfilled in that sense. But I mean, if Kenzie and I hadn't met 6 years ago and the pandemic happened, and then I'm like, what a nightmare it'd be. So I assume you all met pre-pandemic. Like, how long has this kind of familial, incestual thing been going on? Just accounting for your brother, your logical brother and sister.
That reminds me, we haven't had too many scenarios where couples split up and then it just like shattered a part of the like logical family, right? Cool. Just to answer that question, I think we, for the most part, all met in Eugene. Actually, a lot of them went to University of Oregon. A lot of them played ultimate frisbee for the University of Oregon. Nice. And that was sort of the start of a lot of those very close relationships.
Cool. Yeah. And you're 31, I'm 25, so I was 6 years late. That would have been a fun little cohort to be a part of. But that was the whole crazy thing of how this all came about. You live in Denver right now, or you're moving or something like that?
Just bought a house.
Okay.
I closed on a house on Wednesday.
That's exciting.
The day I flew here.
Wow. What a time. I mean, like... I'm like, can we talk about it for a split second? Of like, what was your decision making of like, now seems like a good time, like a global recession and a war, and like, they're peaked and they might be going down, but also interest rates are the highest. Now's the time.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
it's a good question.
It is. What's your thought process?
My thought process was, so my partner just got into medical school in Denver. We've been living with her parents in Colorado Springs for the last 2.5, 3 months, and rent close to where her school is just about what the mortgage on my new house is. Whoa. So it was a choice that I've been leading up to probably for like 6 or 7 years, right? It's like, as fast as you can save money, the housing market has been skyrocketing, right? So really all it took was just this little dip in housing prices to feel like I should pull the trigger when I can. We'll be in Denver for minimum 4 years, right, for her to get through a doctor of osteopathy program. So yeah, rather than paying more money into a rental system, I'll just pay myself a little equity.
That's cool. I went to a cranial osteopath once who helped a lot. It's like, it almost didn't seem like he was doing anything, like just holding your head, cradling it for like 20 minutes. And then they'd go and like they'd set your hand on your knee for like 20 minutes, and they're like, "All right, that's $300."
Yeah.
Like,
did you feel any better?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like pretty much my dad went for a long time, and he's like, "You'll go," and I'm like, "It did feel better," but as soon as I was out of the house, like, I did that when I was younger, like 16, 18 and stuff. So is she going that kind of track or what?
Yeah. So I think
bone doctor.
The interesting part of a doctor of osteopathy program is that it involves manual manipulation. Selfishly, I'm really looking forward to the day that she can just kind of like fix my neck. But she hasn't decided on a specialty yet. I think one thing that surprised me actually about a doctor of osteopathy program, because living in Oregon, I'm exposed to some of them, but their treatment is fairly nuanced, right? Difference between a DO and an MD is very slight. They can have very similar specialties. So like she could still get into surgery or emergency medicine or interventional radiology, right? Those are all still options. And yet there's still like kind of a question mark of what is the DO doing? They're just having these somewhat mystical experiences with patients where, I had 3 herniated discs in my neck.
You did? You personally?
From a car accident.
Whoa.
And I went to a doctor of osteopathy, and basically he like crossed my arms and just laid on me for 2 or 3 minutes, and I got up, and it was the first time I didn't have neck pain in 1.5 years. Wow. It came back gradually, but he also paired with a physical therapist and a chiropractor to sort of maintain therapy over time.
What kind of car crash? That sounds like a brutal way to walk out, is your neck.
It was really just a rear end, right? Got rear-ended while I was in a ride share.
1 star.
It sucked. Yeah, it wasn't his fault. It wasn't the driver's fault.
Yeah.
But
insurance or anything? I mean, that's pretty crazy. It's funny. Just 2 people ago, or maybe 3 people ago, someone was on the other side of that. They killed a person in a car crash.
Oh,
so
my God.
Lucky you came out that way. Just like pretty much just whiplash gave you 3 herniated discs in your neck.
Yeah. I was sort of like looking down to the side and got hit.
What a bad time.
It was a bad time. Yeah.
And that happened how long ago?
At this point, I think it's like 5 years.
Okay. And your neck pain's like significantly better. Herniated disc is something you can heal, like if it's not ruptured or something like that?
Yeah. I wish I had a more thorough answer to that. I do believe that it can heal. Ruptured discs, I think, are slightly more complicated. But really, there's just like infinite variety of how bad an injury could be.
Yeah. So you got lucky and you met a DO. That was also the lucky part. I had a very similar kind of pain where it's like I went through acupuncture, chiropractor, doctors got a X-ray to see if it was scoliosis. Like so many things. Wow. No one got it. And this random that's why I went to kinesiology school. This random person's like, oh, you have stuck nerves, or like your nerves are just too short, or from like there's like certain posture for too long. Yeah. And he showed me nerve flossing, which hurt like a bitch, but it went away. And I'm like, holy shit, So I'm like, I want to help people, and I'm like, I don't want to help people. I don't.
My goodness.
I really don't. I'm like, fuck them. I'm helping myself. I'm helping those around me. Not helping some 90-year-old who got in a car crash. I'm like, yeah, I'll spend the next whole day rehabilitating your knee. I'm like, they're just gonna die. I'm like, all market shit. So as you can tell, I mean, you said you're selfish about your partner getting the DO. We're all selfish at the end of the day. As a marketer, you gotta admit, everyone is kind of thinking about themselves all day, right?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to escape that, right? I think a lot of things around us are encouraging that line of thought. But yeah, self-interest runs deep.
Yeah.
I think,
and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You need it for survival. You need to be thinking about, what am I going to eat later? Who am I going to see? Who am I going to procreate with? All these things. Like, so as a marketer, how do you talk? I would say you're one of the best salespeople, and you're a manager. You're not even really a salesperson, but you're one of the best ones that I've talked to in a long time. That's part of the reason I wanted to do the show.
Great.
I'm like, what are your core ethos? Mine would be say the word you. Especially in making ads and stuff, like the audience or the person you're talking to needs to know how they fit into the story, whatever you're saying. So say the word you so they can place themselves. And the second one would be speak to themselves, like talk to them, like how will this benefit your life? What will this do for you? Like those are my two main things. I'm curious if you have any others.
Yeah, that's right. I think really in sales, the question becomes like what can I ask to learn more about you, right? Being curious. Is probably the most important thing, especially for the sales folks that I'm training or coaching. Being curious and sort of earning the right to make a recommendation. And making that recommendation takes a fair bit of groundwork.
Yeah. That would not work in ads. Hey, what's your car situation?
Right.
like Dora the Explorer ads. in person-to-person sales or Zoom sales, that would work significantly better. I'm like, why haven't I never thought of that? I'm like, I can't talk to people.
It doesn't work the same.
Work the same. But yes, I mean, over Zoom, it's really hard for me to connect with people. I just did a Zoom interview with this person at Stanford. I'm like, I fumbled. How do you manage to still connect with people over like digitally mediated communication? Sucks.
Sure. Yeah. I think the number one thing that makes a difference is just showing them something that's relevant. Okay. Like even if we're in person and I show you something that you just don't care about, you'll lose interest just as fast as someone on Zoom. But I think there's very little that we can do that really affects how someone on the other side of the screen is perceiving what we're showing, unless the topic that we're talking about has them interested already. Yeah.
And what interests them is selfish things, or like if a company,
goals, very commonly goals.
Yeah. And speaking of, are you a goal-oriented person? You asked it when you were inquiring about me, which I'm like, oh shit, like thinking back to how you interacted with me, I'm like, oh, you did do these things surprisingly well.
I'm glad it was surprising.
Yeah. So are you goal-oriented in your personal and professional life? I thought you just mentioned a meta article that says being goal-oriented is a bad thing.
Well, it depends on what the goal is, right? And so goal-oriented towards what the study was showing. I wish I could remember the name of it. I'll send it to you after this. It's like the goal having be a short-term monetary gain typically detracts from your experience of chasing that goal. For me, I am goal-oriented, right? I mentioned it earlier. If I could do anything, I would be on a vineyard making wine with those closest to me if they want to be there, kicking back.
Love it.
And that's something that I've been chasing since I decided that right around 11 years ago.
Yeah. So you a big drinker? Alcoholic?
Not really. Well, maybe every alcoholic would say that. But I enjoy drinking. Actually, over the last 3 weeks, I decided to stop drinking with one of my coworkers. We just decided to give it a shot. Right? Cool. It had been a while since we just went like cold turkey sober.
Yeah.
And that was fun. That was enjoyable. Nice. Obviously, I broke that as soon as my baby niece was born.
Yeah.
There's something about celebrating in the waiting room that was worth it. But no, it's the aesthetic of growing wine and making wine is really the thing that draws me to it. Like drinking wine is easy, but making really good wine is pretty hard.
So you brewed stuff before? Like I've made kombucha and I've made apple cider, like hard apple cider, but then I see wine, I'm like, oh my God, that seems confusing to not make it taste horrible.
Sure. I think fermentation has commonalities across all of those beverages, right? Like science is science. But what draws me to it really is like my family owned and operated a vineyard in Mendocino County, Redwood Valley. Shout out. For around 85 years.
Wow.
And unfortunately, in my dad's generation, right, that winery went fairly defunct. My grandfather died, was no longer able to manage the vineyard. His kids moved on. They all had lives of their own.
But it's in your blood to want to do it.
Yeah, there's an aspect of like wishing I could have seen that property. Because by the time I was born, the vines were gone. There was still like these big redwood tanks where they used to, crush grapes and ferment wine. And so it was sort of like walking around some ruins as a kid.
Yeah.
And I built up a bit of a story in my head around like, oh, how wonderful would it be to have those things still.
This is blowing my mind. This has been your dream for 11 years. So once you're 22, you knew what you wanted to, like, your end goal. I don't know my end goal. Like, in terms of that vividly, that's crazy, man. I'm like, a vineyard, if someone pitched that, I'd be like, that sounds really good. But I guess, do you think it's good to have, like, a long-term, so when you take, like, I'm going to take a subscription as a service sales position, that'll help me be a vineyard one day. Or, like, how do you, day to day, how do you like make decisions? Do you read a lot of books? Do you watch YouTube videos? Like, how do you self-educate and kind of progress on that path?
Yeah, good question. Sometimes I wonder if I'm just kind
You're
of
perfect. I'll move the mic a little bit.
Appreciate it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm like spinning my wheels. That's always a question when you're seemingly day to day is so far away from what you want it to be. I would say that what I do is leading me down a path that will make it more likely that I can make a choice to own and operate this thing as a business that is more or less self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Sustainability in the choices that I make in terms of like reaching these goals is one of the really important things that I think I've developed over the last 6 years. Making choices that build towards this goal, even though it might feel circuitous in the day-to-day, has been at times challenging to remind myself that yes, these are in fact the choices that I need to make to get to this place one day.
It's a great way of thinking about it. I'm dying to know that, like, you're 50, you're 16, you do it, and you're like, I fucking hate this. But you do. 39 years down the drain. No, what I'm more curious about is you started by saying just kind of a phrase or a term that not a lot of people think in terms of inputs and outputs being disconnected, or like, your outcome isn't just about your time spent. But then you said you want the winery to be self-sustaining.
That's right.
And that is, the physical labor is not necessarily going to be that. So like, wouldn't you want to just do it as a passion project and then do a massively, optimized input output for the labor? Like, I'm so curious.
Absolutely. Yeah. Optimizing those kinds of systems is just peak experience for me, right? Like,
cool.
That is what I want to spend my time doing.
Score.
Managing people, managing sales teams gets me closer
to managing grapes,
to having that experience of just like optimizing systems and making it good for people who are involved. I would say that what I fear most is getting to a place where I'm able to make this big investment, right? Own this land, begin to operate it, and then live in fear of it one day not making enough money to sustain itself, and then within 20 years lose it. And
your great-grandchild grows up like, I always wanted to see it.
Yeah, or my nieces and nephews, and then all of a sudden the cycle returns 80 years later where it's like, well.
Living in a cycle of trauma, aren't we?
Right. If we can escape it, it'd be better.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you ever just say, no, fuck that, I'm going to, live in a VR? I mean, in terms of like thinking about free will, I'm like, you today, 31, you're living based off of what 20-year-old you decided would be your goal. And 20-year-old used to, like, that's a lot of like random kind of like, at some point, I mean, I'm saying this because I feel like I'm spinning my wheels too at times in life where you're like, what's this all for? It's just, it's a weird kind of thing. It's like 3 a.m. and you're working. You're like, I just did an all-nighter. It's 3 a.m. the next day. You're like, this can't be good. But you enjoy it too. There's something, optimizing systems has this, it's such a good feeling. Yeah, I mean, like, it feels good. in terms of optimizing systems with people involved, that isn't like we have a great communication. You know, do you have 100% say over who you hire?
No.
See, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
Because I'd be like, you know, you give me like moldy dough and you're like, make a baguette. I'm like, it's just, I can spend all the time in the world and it's just not as worth it, you know? So I'm like,
of course, yeah.
How do you kind of fit that into your whole optimizing systems? Or do you just like bite your tongue and be like, hands I'm dealt, or like dealing with the cards I'm dealt?
Yeah, sure. So there are ways to ensure that a bad hire has a limited impact on your business, on your team, on the way that you want to run things.
I'm
right?
excited
Well,
to know.
There's contractually, right? There's language that businesses put in place to ensure that bad hires can only do so much if they turn out to just really be as rotten as a person could in a given position. That's super rare.
Yeah, but it's not even rotten. It's just what's the thing? Don't blame like evil on what could be attributed to incompetence or something along those lines. Like it's not that like evil people, they're so easy to spot. You're like, oh, they have malicious intent.
Exactly.
It's the people who are just incompetent and then cover it up in ways. I'm not even talking about my current job. I'm talking about when I was working at Chipotle, Mod Pizza, like every job I've ever had. That wasn't just in food, I swear. You know, there's just some people who where you're like, what is going on in there? And I mean, I couldn't imagine. I hope that I get to go through my entire life without ever managing another human being.
I think you could. There's no reason you couldn't.
Right? Because there's different, like managing capital. You can manage media. You can manage a lot of things. And right when we got this job, you know, we had people like, yeah, you guys should move into a management position sometime. Like, you know, but like you are going this route. So do you see it like as the quickest way to get your outputs and your inputs disconnected? Because you're like leveraging yourself with people?
I think that's an interesting question. The way I think about managing people, I think there's a couple wrinkles here. One is that people are probably the best way to multiply impact. I think that empowering folks to make smart choices and to determine the way that we should move, be it strategy or what we should do this week, like how are you going to spend your time today? I think those are things that I obviously won't know the right answer for every person that I manage or that I talk to. However, giving them tools with which to deploy themselves in a meaningful way towards the goals of the business is like really fun. And I think more often than not, incompetence doesn't prevent you from finding the way that individuals can have the best impact on a given system.
And so do you think giving people freedom helps them do the things that they're best at? And like a lot of jobs, especially performance and metric-based positions, don't allow for that. So how do you, like if you get someone and they're like, they're this job and they just start doing the bare minimum of that and then doing this other thing, like can you like, you know, it's, I mean, because again, Kenzie and I started with TikTok here at Arcimoto, and then we're all social medias, and now we're like ads, and it's just like this weird thing of if we were told, no, you just do that. It's like, whoa, you know.
They did.
Oh, and they did. They literally did. It was, but not many people. Like you know, Kenzie and I's direct supervisor is probably the single best boss I've ever had, and obviously my next door neighbor Mark, who had a large impact, one of the best people. But it's just other middle management and other people at your level. It's just the crabs in the barrel kind of thing of like, hey, whoa. I mean, my brother works for the government, and I'm not even gonna out him. But the general consensus is if you work too fast, you make other people look bad. I'm like, that's a crazy kind of thing, you know?
Yeah, I think that kind of office politics exists.
Yeah.
Right. However, what I've noticed in sales specifically is that there's not a lot of time for office politics.
Yeah.
It is so metrics driven, and your ability to influence your own outcome is, influencing outcomes is challenging. However, influencing your input, getting back to that kind of terminology, right, is entirely up to you.
Dissect, it's hard to influence outcomes. I think that's the only, like that's, I mean, obviously you can impact your input. I'm going to put more effort or more time on this, but everything you do impacts your outcome or output.
It has an impact, absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you trick yourself into saying like, I know for a fact that this person that I'm trying to help, and straight up, I want you to buy this product, I have no control over whether or not you're going to buy that product.
Okay.
So I could forecast, 95% every month.
Yeah.
There's still 5% that you just won't know. You will not be able to control dollar for dollar, like what the other person on the other side of the contract is going to do.
Yeah.
Specifically in sales development, right? We make cold calls. I train people to call and interrupt your day. That's what Nader did, by the way.
Yeah, it's a rough thing to do.
It's challenging. And you could be on the phone with the nicest person at the worst time. And they will yell at you, they will hang up the phone, and you will lean back in your chair saying, was that my fault? What could I do differently?
Can we role play it?
Sure, yeah.
I'm not having the greatest day, but I might be won over. And you have a couple seconds to say how this will benefit my life. And I'm Arcimoto. I'm like genuinely the person who does ads at Arcimoto, like one of them.
Yeah.
They could be like, bring. Hello? Who's this?
Hi.
Morgie?
Tyger. Yeah, this is Morgan from Chili Piper. How are you doing?
I'm great. Wonderful.
Yeah. Do you mind if I take 34 seconds of your time just to see?
I'll be counting. Go for it.
Okay, great. Yeah. So when it comes to this form that I see on your website, what happens when someone fills that out?
We follow up with them, as any company does with a form.
Do you specifically, or does someone else on your team?
No, someone else on the team. Big team, big company.
Yeah, what part of that process are you involved with?
So I put up the ads, and I make the ads and we put them up. That kind of part of it. So that's the customer experience. I don't have input on that, but
yeah. So when you're thinking about the success, of that ad, how are you measuring it currently?
Oh, how many vehicles get sold, obviously, or how many. That's the goal of everything is sell a product, right?
Mm-hmm. And when someone comes through that form, what happens next to get them closer to that vehicle?
Yeah, technology, emails, stuff like that, phone calls, which can be a lot. What's your point? Cut to the chase.
Yeah.
What does chili pepper do?
Sure. So what we do is exactly influence the way that folks are coming to your website and getting closer to that next step of buying a car. So if there's any friction between when they request more information on this form I see on your website and when they talk to someone on your sales team, right? What would it do for your business to have that friction reduced to zero and allow them to choose a time?
Now, the word friction, role play off. Yeah. I really like the word reducing friction.
Of course you do.
But a lot of people might not. People would be like, what do you mean? It's a computer. There's no friction there. But just like these little things of your day of like, this takes a little bit longer. And then, I'm curious, does certain terminology not land with people? And are you did you find Arcimoto just by like every ad you see that's a form submission, do you just boom send them an email, or like how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So there's two pieces of what I'm hearing, right? The one I'll address first is prospecting, right? The idea of finding a company that could be interested in our services. Yeah. Luckily enough, right, Chili Piper it kind of feels like selling a shovel during a gold rush, right? There's like,
you're not a solution finding a problem. Or you're what's the saying? Like everyone's saying NFTs are just like a solution trying to find problems. It's like, it doesn't seem like that, which is why I'm surprising. I'm like, actually want to hang out, give you a demo drive and have you on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing when you find someone you're like, that's not just bloatware in my life where it's just extra stuff.
Yeah. And there's a lot of sales folks out there struggling with products that they might not use, they might not believe in, they might have a very difficult time having that conversation. Luckily, we use our own product, right? So a lot of folks that come to us actually don't know an alternative. And so that's something that we have to train is like, look, if you didn't use this product, here's what you'd have to do. Like, here are the spreadsheets that you might have to manage. Here's the way that you'd have to update your CRM, right? The way that you have to reach out and talk to the people who are requesting more information. And within an hour, 90% of the people who filled out that form are as good as a cold lead.
That's cool. What percent of your mind is filled up with information relating to Chili Piper?
Good question. Hopefully as little as possible. I really would like to function on the minimum amount of information that I need to solve problems.
Okay.
And I think there's a difference when I'm training cold calling between being ready and being prepared. So being ready might look like asking you the same kinds of questions that I just did. Right? Like, I have an idea of what part of the process you're involved in.
Yeah. And I had to be a little bit vague because I'm but yes.
Right. But that's how role plays go.
Yeah.
And so being curious and getting you to talk more than me on that call, to tell me about your process, allows me to have time to think
Yeah.
and to find ways that I can sort of guide the conversation to something that might be helpful.
Yeah.
What's really fun is making sure that I don't try and sell you something that you have no need for.
So if that went, we have 100% of people who fill out that form, we generally are on a phone call with them within an hour.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say?
Yeah, I'd be curious how many of those folks end up getting into a meeting and taking that next step.
Yeah. But I mean, imagine the product, imagine it's already solved somehow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then when you be like, you know what, whatever you got going on is awesome. Have a great day.
Exactly. Yeah, I've done that on calls before. It's disappointing, but it is also empowering because I have this list of people that I'm going to call. Right? If I'm making 100 calls today, and I know for a fact that I don't need to follow up with Tyger from Arkimoto anymore because they're killing it, then that's one less person that I need to worry about.
Yeah.
And I move on.
Not information just about the product Chili Piper, but all these contacts, all these people that you have to kind of oh yeah, I'm going to have to reach out to. That's got to intrude your 6 p.m. when you're with your partner. You got to be like, oh yeah, I'm looking forward to following up on that. Or do you just shut it off? You're like that Severance movie or show, which I never watched. You almost have to be.
I haven't seen that show, but the premise is really intriguing to me. It's how can you be a different person at work than at home? And unfortunately, that's what I think a lot of people need to do. At work, you're right. Sales bleeds into the rest of your time, especially when you're working on commission, right? So at Chili Piper, for sales folks, we pay a base salary for you to act in the best interests of the company. We pay you commission to act in your own best interests.
Incentivize. I like it.
Right. And so incentivizing folks to both take time off and to work when they need to is a challenging balance. And I think that's really difficult for a lot of sales development folks in particular. Finding that balance is really tricky.
Yeah. How do you incentivize people taking time off? That'd be a tricky one.
Yeah. So we have unlimited PTO, right? We make sure that they have a plan because their quota might change depending on the amount of time that they take off, right? So if you take off the majority of a month, no way I expect you to have the same output as you normally would, right? So we work together. A lot of sales development is arithmetic, right? So how many people do you need to reach out to every day to get within 10% of your quota? We have that math for everyone on my team. And so depending on the time off, we apply that arithmetic to the days left.
Yeah.
And then we got to work hard sometimes.
Prorate it. Yeah. And can people just take off all the months where companies generally don't spend money and then just work the other two, or take off 2 out of every 3 months of a quarter, all year round? It seems like you game that system. And what happens if someone, the person who gets 50% of their quota and the person who doubles their quota, those are two employees. What happens to them? I'm dying to know. If you can talk about that, that's specific.
Sure, absolutely. Obviously, I won't be talking about specifics with individuals, but in general, right, performance management is part of a lot of positions.
Yeah.
And in sales, right, it boils down to just a few statistics. Like you said, right, somebody hitting 150% of quota versus 50%, right? They have different things that they need to work on. And when your compensation is also reliant on that quota, right, the person who's getting 50% doesn't want to be there. No one gets into sales to hit 50% of their quota.
That's a good point.
And so everyone on the team, everyone who's involved in that person's performance is motivated to help them perform better.
Yeah.
Right. So I have no interest in terminating working relationships as a result of performance.
Wow, really?
What I would prefer is dedicated coaching time and to see if this is a role that you want to succeed in. A lot of people are getting into sales development as their first job, right? A lot of folks just fresh out of college or with no college degree, right? It's one of those few positions that you can get into and make 6 figures without a college degree.
Yeah. What's the number one attribute? Is it just charisma or is it listening, quick thinking, logic, emotion? What differentiates your better performing people you've worked with?
Good question.
To everyone else.
I think two things that stand out are something that we talk about in the hiring process that is grit. Overall, how willing are you to try something and fail at it and willing to try again immediately, right? One of the hardest things is to get yelled at on the phone, hang up, and call somebody again, right?
Yeah.
Like subjecting yourself to that kind of rejection is tough.
How do you deal with it? Do you have
How
a
do
lot
I
of
deal
grit?
with it? I developed grit. Yeah. It was a kind of grit that I wasn't fully aware of how to develop until I got into sales, right? Like it's very rare that I get yelled at just in my day-to-day until I started sales, right?
Yeah.
Like I've been yelled at indiscriminately, and that's very easy to shrug off.
Yeah,
It's
that's
like,
nothing.
oh, well, they're just yelling, right? I could be anybody walking by.
Yeah.
But when it's directed at me and my family in the way that like they are talking about,
Jeez.
what they would prefer to be doing right now than being on the phone with me, is different. The grit that I had coming into this role was knowing that I could work very hard for little to no payoff. And that was just something that I like have done, right?
By helping the environment.
By working since I was 12, right? So I started working when I was 12 in landscaping, and then I got into construction, and then I went to college.
Take a day off, man. Jesus.
It was just this thing that I did, right? Like my family was always, right, my blood family, right? My parents were very invested in instilling a deep work ethic in me.
Is it a good thing?
It worked, right?
It worked.
I like it.
Okay. Would you instill it in your kid if you have one?
Yes, I think it has benefited me just as much as like being willing to talk to folks that I don't know, right? Which is sort of curiosity. You can call it charisma, but I think that genuine curiosity and grit are the two things that really make a good foundation for a salesperson.
That's really beautiful. In terms of work ethic, because it's a big question. I know people who work really hard. I know people who work really hard on stuff that's meaningless. And it's brutal. So, I mean, it's pretty easy to say of what you're working on matters more than how hard you work, right?
Yeah.
And then you, looping back to earlier in the show, you said the best way to multiply something is who you work with. So in many ways, and I'm not trying to disparage anything, working hard is definitely a part of the puzzle, but it's like who you work with and what you work on is like those two decisions, like a decision of, okay, I'm going to start spending my energy writing a book or going to a vineyard. Like one decision can mean more than 2,000 hours in a work year.
Yeah.
That's crazy, isn't it? Do you have any key pivotal decisions in your life that you've looked back at? I think I told you the whole Joe Rogan, DMT, LA, and then the podcast thing. I mean, that was like 2 or 3 key decisions of, I'll go on Reddit and I'll try making, it's like all these things led to here. Whereas if I had picked a different thing of like, oh, I don't like Reddit, or I'm not going to try making DMT. It's like I could have spent 2,000 hours working toward physical therapy and I would have not gotten as far. So what are some key pivotal points? I might start asking more people this question. I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a fun question.
And it's hard to like look back at them, but
it's also a healthy thing to do. One that stands out is when I decided to stay at the University of Oregon. There was a time where I was one decision away from going on to become a sea captain through the California Maritime Institute. Okay. I had a good friend who he went on to be a mechanical engineer on tanker ships. He had been there for a year. We had talked about, how I wasn't sure if college was for me or if like the things that I was studying really mattered to me, what direction I'd like to be going in. And, the draw of working on the open sea is pretty interesting, right? You work 6 months out of the year and you get paid quite a bit.
All right, that's good. It sounds like a nightmare to me, but I see TikToks of like the ship's going like, I'm like, no, not for me.
Exactly.
But yes, I guess it could be appealing.
So what interested me was the freedom that you would get the other 6 months of the year, right? Making $250,000 in 6 months is not bad when you're
not bad at all.
18, staring down student loans. Well, maybe I could be a sea captain for a little while. Yeah. Ultimately, I decided that wasn't for me, right? The idea of being away from people that I was close to or, people that I would be close to in the future and just having 6 months of my life every year be dedicated to being on a boat.
Especially unsustainable when you have a kid. I mean, just so many. That's some lines of trauma that you'd be starting your kid. I'm going to be a sea captain. No.
I'll see you in 6 months.
Yeah. So did you know your partner? I don't know how long you two have been together. Yeah. So you've been together for like a decade or so?
We've been together for 9 years.
Oh, wow.
Now. And so this was prior to us being together was making this decision. However, it was maybe that one decision cascaded into probably 10 or 12 of the people that are in my logical family now, right? Like 10 or 12 of the people that I'm closest to, I would never have met had I made that choice.
Yeah. So there's you out there that's just on a ship. Would you be out there in summer or winter?
Good question. Maybe a little bit of both. It depends on where.
So you'd be on a ship somewhere with a bunch of guys, but instead you're here and you're enjoying life. Right decision?
Yeah.
I mean, what would you do with all that money? But you're literally like a slave half of the year. Like you don't get to pick where you are, what day you get up, what you eat, who you're around. Like that'd be soul crushing.
Yeah, no doubt.
Then you get to live like a millionaire.
I fully expect that the choices that I've based a lot of my life on to never have been on my plate had I made that one choice, right? Opening a winery when I was 18 didn't seem like, I had no idea what I was doing. So who's to say?
But that was a genuine option to like, or at least not be a sea captain immediately, but be on the path to be a sea captain?
Yeah, it was like a 4-year program where 2 out of those years I would have already been on the water, right?
Well, Kenzie and I got a good backup plan now.
That's right.
Damn.
Merchant Marines.
Merchant Marines. Oh, so you get like military benefits or
no? That's like a different option for those who want to be working on the water, right? Merchant Marines is another type of organization that is outside of something that is like California Maritime.
Yeah. So we got like 10 or 12 minutes left. I'm just curious, like, I mean, you're wearing a whoop strap. You must be into fitness and health or sleeping. Yeah. I didn't really hear about what you did in biology. Are there any like aspects of yourself that you're like, not a lot of people know about, or like there's what's on the top of your mind more often than not,
That's a fun question. Let's see, 2 hobbies that I haven't been able to do since we moved to Colorado that I've just been dying to get back to are Judo and metalwork. So I was, you could call it an apprentice blacksmith for about 4 years. Until my teacher, he moved to Boston, helped him pack up a blacksmith shop. That is not a task that anybody should take on lightly.
Not fun to help someone move, definitely when it's all just metal and
steel. I think it ended up being 40,000 pounds of steel that was moved across country.
Yeah. And it all made your hands black to touch it.
That's right. Whoa. Yeah. Luckily, I didn't move every piece.
What do you move with them? What do you make with them? Not move with them.
Sure. Sculptures. So largely we made sculpture.
Those ones that I always see rusting when I'm driving by places?
Probably. Those are a bit bigger. I'm just a student. So really what we started with was making leaves. So I don't know if you've heard of like people who blow glass will like try to make a horse as sort of like a project that lets their teachers know that they've reached a certain level of skill. So in blacksmithing, at least specifically with my teacher, it was making a leaf after heating a piece of metal at varying thickness in one heat, which is challenging. It takes a lot of practice. And I think his teacher told him, right, like make leaves, and on your 200th one, it'll probably be good enough to keep.
Wow.
The rest of them are just trash.
Do you still have one?
I have dozens.
You have dozens that you're all happy with. So
I've made hundreds of them. I'm probably happy with dozens of them. And yeah, so that was sort of like practice, what we did, right? Before we moved, we were working on this dragon sculpture, which was fun, right? Just learning how to move metal in whatever way you choose is super enjoyable. I got into it to make tools for woodworking. I was the person who was like, I'm going to get into woodworking. And then I looked at how much it costs to buy a hand chisel. I was like, wow, I'm not going to get into woodworking. Maybe I can make tools.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is crazy odds. 1 second here.
Yeah. Oh, you got a piece of metal.
I've never bought metal in my entire life.
What's this for?
2 days ago, I bought 36 by 10 inches of aluminum.
Oh, my goodness.
Because a friend is gonna, as you can see that one right there. I've had that for like 4 years because a good friend, like we were just a group of kids in college.
Yeah.
And he put on a CNC machine a marker and made this. Like, can you do that with like an actual piece of metal? He's like, yeah. So I'm like, I'm gonna be doing not real metal working. Someone else is gonna be inputting something to a computer. But I'm excited. I have a piece of metal. So in terms of woodworking is expensive because wood's expensive.
Wood's expensive. Tools are expensive.
Metal's absurdly expensive. I mean, this was $50, but if that was brass or bronze, I don't remember what I asked. He said it'd be $900. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, that's really expensive, right? The things that I use, mild steel, right? You can get leaf springs off of an old truck at a pick and pull for very cheap.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, interesting. And then judo, that's the one where you can grab their belt.
You can't grab the belt, but they're wearing a gi.
Yeah.
And it's different than jiu-jitsu in that it most often involves the throwing aspect of like grappling sports.
So I had the throwing right, just not the.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the belt is actually like specifically off limits, so you can't just grab it.
Okay. Anything else though? I mean, so like, what would get you into throwing? If I were in, I wouldn't want to do like a strike. So I did wrestling when I was younger.
Yeah, great.
And
sport.
I liked it. I didn't like the awkward ear muffs, but I didn't want to get cauliflower ears. I didn't like the look of the unitard.
Sure.
So there's aspects I didn't like. But it's like the limberness that you're forced to get, and like it's really good. But I'm like, a lot of people have skin diseases and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's so many. Like, I wish I could do it in a more sterile environment or something. But I'm sure that's part of it. So what about judo?
Sure.
Do you like, and dislike? I mean, if I got thrown once, I'd be like, I'm fucking,
This sucks.
Yeah. Or just like a permanent injury from like just like an ankle breaking. I'd be like, was that worth it? So what makes it worth it for you?
Yeah, good question. So going back to that car accident, right? Had a car accident, in pain, chronic pain for about 3 years. Towards the end of that, a good friend of mine, we just had a frank conversation about the fact that we were like getting out of shape and we didn't like it. We were both athletes in college. Like,
were you fat?
We got to do something. I was gaining weight, and so we just sort of looked at each other like, we got to do something. And like working out in the gym is fun up to a point, and then something that I didn't expect to really need is having a goal. And so that goal became performance in a sport. And my friend who's actually about to have his first baby next week. It's a good baby season, I guess.
Yeah, seriously. My brother, your brother ain't a friend. Crazy.
Yeah, fall babies. But he just decided that we should try martial arts. And I said, okay. We ended up finding a school in Portland that was 94 years old. So it's one of the oldest judo schools in North America, by far the oldest one in Portland, and it had just an insane lineup of teachers. Cool. Just some folks that are at a level that very few actually make it to, right? Like 7th Dan teachers, right? That doesn't mean a lot,
it's like
unless
the
you're
judo
familiar
equivalent
with
of like the Gracie family in jiu-jitsu, or what you always hear about.
Yeah, right. Like these folks won championships internationally.
Whoa.
They were really high level.
Yeah.
And it was a nonprofit. Right. So it was like, how could I not be involved in like this thing with all this history?
I'd move up there. That sounds pretty great.
Yeah. It's an incredible school. It's called Obukan. I believe it means like O State School. So it was named by the founder of judo. So it has all this like deep history in the Japanese community in Portland, as well as just judo in the United States. So we got involved. It was better than getting kicked or punched in the face.
Oh yeah.
We were both really sore for a long time.
Would you just go against each other? You were similar weights?
No. I outweigh him probably by like 30 or 40 pounds. So I was always put with like the biggest dudes in the class. I remember taking my first fall, right? There's a few techniques that are quite painful. My first fall was like probably the most dangerous technique in judo. And we just had to take 10 in a row, right? I felt like maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. And sticking with it, right, it gradually became less painful. I think I just got like denser. I think my body composition changed meaningfully. And it became fun, right?
Wow.
It became sort of like chess, but like actively fighting someone like really fast.
Do you have a higher tolerance for a lot of pains? Like if you get a burn now or a cut, or is it just literally like, if someone like falling is the equivalent of getting punched, just like these blunt force.
It's like body blows. Like I think I could take some body blows. But like burns, really, that was from blacksmithing. Like I burn my hands constantly, and that doesn't really bother me. Cold things drive me nuts, right? Like if I have to touch something really, really cold, oof. It's like that's more painful than burns.
You get a job at Jamba Juice just to overcome that by touching this.
Like Cold Stone. Yeah, I'll just go over there and make some ice cream. I'm actually nervous about living in Colorado. It gets really cold there. But
we probably wouldn't have had fun on a boat in the Pacific Ocean. That would not have been a good time.
I'd have different tolerances. Yeah, I'd be walking kind of wobbly down the street, but I would be fine on the open ocean.
That's fun. Yeah, that's funny. Man, and so did you ever like fight with people? So it's not your friends, you don't like know them.
Mhm.
You know, it's like you win a move and they're like get a little too competitive. Like that's the thing I
Yeah.
never liked about physical sport. Even game, like anything where someone can be like, "Oh yeah," and they take a little too seriously. I'm like that ruins a lot of like I would really want to know the person to be like,
Yeah.
"Hey, we're just playing, right? We're getting competitive."
Feeling
but like
safe is really important.
I don't win better by actually hitting you harder, but like I've been in positions of like wrestling and stuff where I'm like, we're on the same team, we're practicing. You just took it way too seriously.
Are you kicking my ass right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the things that I actually admire the most about judo as a sport is that there's so much foundational work that you do before you're ever put in a scenario where there's like anything dangerous happening. So like being able to trust the person that you're fighting is something I like a lot about that sport, right? There's a lot of rules. There's more rules than like in the MMA or in jiu-jitsu. Like there's things that are off limits, right? And so part of the study is like building moral character in accordance with like the things that you're learning. And you know, I think that's one of the aspects of judo that sets it apart from other martial arts. So that it was developed as a pedagogy. Right. Jigoro Kano, the founder of judo, developed it so that it would be something that we could put students in, like from age 5 and up. That was also one of the things I liked the most. Right, exactly.
That's cool. I love it. It blows my mind how much time you have for like these extracurricular activities, but you've never just been like, I'm going to go work at a vineyard for
right, yeah.
Just
back to the question of am I really making strides towards this goal or not?
Yeah. Well, I know so many people are like, I just want to go live out on like a permaculture, like a thing. I'm like, have you ever tried a single aspect to that? Like a lot of people set goals that they never do. So I'm curious, like, would you ever go working on a winery or like an olive farm over in Italy would be great. It sounds great.
It's hilarious that you bring that up. I should have mentioned this earlier. We test drove that life, right? Me and my logical brother. Okay. We moved to Spain after school. We worked on a vineyard for a couple months. And that was really where we made this plan together.
An olive vineyard or a wine vineyard?
A wine vineyard.
So you did do this. Okay. Beautiful.
Yeah,
nice.
Exactly.
You got it.
We test drove it. We made sure that it was something that we could do, or at least that we would love to try. Well, who knows if we're going to be any good at it? We might make the worst wine in the Willamette Valley, but we're going to try. Yeah.
So you lived in Spain. You said, "Yeah, I'm going to go back to Eugene, Oregon." Sounds like a great plan. Like you're in Spain, you made it. Isn't it the place where they like take naps in the day and they're like a lot better work-life balance? Not calling anyone lazy, but my understanding is that there's a cultural difference where they respect time off a lot more than here.
There is, yeah, no doubt.
Kenzie.
And I'm a huge fan of that culture. Siestas and tapas, two best things that never made it to the U.S. Probably on purpose, right? The idea of giving out free food and taking a nap in the middle of the day, pretty anti-capitalist values. Yeah. But yeah, so where we were, right, it got hot during the day. It became a practical choice to take a 2-hour nap after having a glass of wine with lunch, and that was just how we
and
lived
like
our
the
lives
bosses
there.
knew, like people who work.
They were doing it together.
I guess you're on a vineyard. That makes sense.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, this is the time of day where we chill out, have some wine, and take a nap. When it cools down, we'll work again, and then we'll eat dinner at like 9 or 10 p.m.
And you were woofing? How'd this happen?
Yeah, that's right. Good call.
I am on a guessing speed.
You are killing it.
I'll take it. That's man. Well, then I am unbelievably excited to see kind of as you progress there. I don't know how often you'll come to Oregon. We pretty much just hit an hour, but
sure.
This has been really fun getting to. Before we started, you were like, "What are we going to talk about?" I'm like, "We'll get it." It's kind of just a character piece. How was it? Was it as much as you were expecting, or was it?
Crazy? Yeah, I'm sitting here sweating, but I had a great time. Yeah.
Hey, go back to the very question I asked maybe before the show started. Like, are you like? Do you have any anxiety? I mean, there's something that I think like 70% of adults today have anxiety. There's more anxiety and SSRI prescriptions than there are people in the U.S. last year.
Oh my gosh!
So I'm like, I don't think it's a crazy thing. I've blunted mine with maybe like Phenibut or Kratom or stuff like that, just occasionally, obviously. But I'm like, I don't drink and stuff like that. What does anxiety feel like for you, and how do you blunt it?
Yeah, good question. Frankly, I'm not sure. Right, anxiety's a big question in my mind around like what does it feel for every individual, right? There's obviously a huge scale of experiences. Everyone's own chemistry is quite a bit different when it comes to how that affects how they feel. Anxiety for me, I've noticed recently actually like giving presentations or speaking in public, I'll have like this tendency to just like kind of stop breathing. Like I'll have to remind myself to breathe.
Oh,
and it's just so stressful in the moment because I feel like I'm going to pass out. I end up like stopping mid-sentence, looking like an idiot on Zoom, and just like have to kind of
never guess
get myself back to where I can say the thing that I meant to say 20 seconds ago.
So public speaking, you're really good one-on-one. I would not have guessed that at all. Wow.
Yeah.
And just breathe. That's such an easy answer.
Well, yeah, it's a surprising thing to forget to do.
Yeah.
I feel like a failure of a human when it happens because it's like the one thing I can count on even when I'm sleeping.
Did you ever vape or smoke or anything like that?
I've smoked weed occasionally. I smoked cigarettes once in a while, and it just gives me a brutal headache, so that was an easy thing to stop doing.
Easy. I've gotten into vaping, and the whole goal is you don't want to bring it as low as you can, so I've noticed it got me in the habit of taking more shallow breaths sometimes. Like if I'm,
interesting.
Just like not like playing a video game, so like artificially stressed. Like that's probably the most stress I feel is I'm like playing a video game, like, oh, I want to get him. I'll like lick my lips, and I'll be like breathing really shallow. I'm like, what the fuck am I doing? But then I mean like I'll be talking, like I love just doing stuff that's like, just out of the ordinary of like talking to people and stuff like that. So it's very interesting. Maybe I just artificially, she's laughing right now because I'll be playing on.
Just deep in it.
It's really odd things and then why I go toward that, but I don't go toward like scary video games or scary movies. That would cause me like deep anxiety. But at the end of the world, I might start asking more people that because everyone does have some form of anxiety, and not a lot of people ever talk about it. So everyone probably thinks that theirs is uniquely different.
Sure, yeah, and it'll manifest differently on who's feeling it or what that experience actually changes in terms of behavior. But yeah, for me, I would say managing it usually comes after the fact. Like it's very difficult for me to get things under control when they're happening in the moment.
Yeah. Feels like you have less time sometimes in life. Like sometimes you just have more time and like you can do more thoughts, and other times it's like time's condensed. It's a weird thing.
Yeah. So in retrospect, right, I would love to develop better tools for myself around that as well. So if you hear of anything
just
good,
get a tattoo in your hand. Just breathe.
Just breathe. Don't forget.
A long time ago when I'd take psychedelics, I'd write drink water, go pee. Because if I was ever in a situation where I'm like watching a movie and I'm like, why am I so uncomfortable? I'd be like, do one of those two things. It gets you out of the situation. If you're either drinking water or going pee, like it just you reinvigorates you. You're like going outside, just something. So I'm like, you could write just breathe, and you're like,
oh, okay,
yeah,
right. Float downstream, drink water, go pee.
There's love it. This has been truly a joy, Morgan. I'm happy that you're having a lot of new kind of members of your logical family coming into to being. You. Yeah, we postponed yesterday's show to the day.
That's right.
Which is wonderful.
I appreciate the flexibility. Thank you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Take care. And if you have any last things to say or, advice for people, like, if you have one last sentence, people listening to this long, they clearly are interested.
I'm amazed that anybody would listen to me for this long. However, thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been a pleasure. Yeah.
It's a joy. All right. Take care and lots of love, everyone.
All right.
Bye.